Hello everyone, welcome back. It's time to get the reading for July as we have now finished the summer solstice and we are in the summer period. And for those of us in the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere, it's heading into winter. So we're sitting at a time where, and if my voice sounds a little off, that's due to the fact that I managed to catch COVID at the beginning of the month of June. And I've been recovering from it, but sadly, that and having asthma results in me coughing. And I know some would say, well, then why am I burning something right here? This is a piece of sage. It is trying to purify the air to continue to make it safer for me to breathe. And the spirits as well, to speak. And that is who we're calling on. So let's see what they have to say for the month of July. All right, so we've got the bones thrown here. And interestingly enough, our first dice, which is the number 3, comes up on the third house. And the third house is about communications, siblings, friends, neighbors, and community, which I think is very appropriate for those of us here in the U.S. as we deal with so much upheaval around our communities and our culture that is here and the relationships we have with each other. So a lot of what you're going to be focusing on in July is going to be about communications, the relationships with your siblings, the relationships with your friends, the relationships with your neighborhood and community. And that's often also a bone that shows up associated with our sense of home and family. Now we also have the adinkra too, which is the ram's horns. And this represents strength. And this is not just physical strength of the body, but also strength of the mind and of the soul as well. This is about humility and wisdom and being able to learn. And that's one of the big things about using strength is learning when is the most appropriate time to use it. So when is it time to use the strength of the body? When is it time to use the strength of the mind? When is it time to use the strength of the soul? We need to learn when are the best moments to do that. And that can affect how we communicate, how we deal with our siblings, our families, and our neighbors. So when we get to the rest of the bones, as they've fallen out here, so this one here, this one is again, the social bone. This one is the home. This one is the work. Since, again, much of what the third house and what the adinkra art are saying, I think that pretty much covers what's here, because here we are at a place where we're going to find relationships coming to an end and some new ones beginning. The boundaries about what is going on in a relationship are shifting and changing. Things that people have not wanted to look at, not wanted to accept, really now must be looked at. And how that gets communicated is very important. How those boundaries about what isn't acceptable and what is not is there. And that, not gonna lie, there's the very much likelihood that some relationships, some communities are going to be shattered. Some are gonna hunker down because there isn't a allowance for the idea that what they are and they can do is being questioned, and it should be, especially when that comes into harming others. So there's going to be some restructuring around that, especially as we see those who are willing to take advantage of it. And as such, the idea is who is actually still being the pariah? Is it those who have for so long been in the mainstream and those that have been on the edges and marginalized and fringed? Or is it now time for those that have been, quote unquote, on the center for them to move to the edges? But we'll see what happens, because that's all about, again, where are we working from a place of strength, humility, and wisdom to know when is the right type of strength to show. So over here at the home bone, I've got a couple of the rib bones connected to it mostly. And it's creating this lovely little place of inspiration in thought, what gets yielded, and what gets built. So the home bone, we're going to see some sense of people being in their home, their sense of their homes, and also visiting other places. So July has also got an energy of travel. And how do you find also those temporary homes that allow us to grow, learn, and find other wisdom? As we come down here to the work bone, we've got the shell, which is turned inwardly. So this is going to be a lot of inner work here going on. Thoughts, feelings, decisions, everything that goes on in the mind, as opposed to just purely about what's going on outside. So that becomes a matter of how are we communicating with the various parts of our own selves, our child parts, our teenage selves, our adult parts, our scared parts, our joyful parts. All this is going to be about how that communicates, and it's all going to be going into what's going on for us internally. From there, we also go over to the copper piece, which is also again, our sense of connection with spirit. And spirit is backing the senses of what we are looking to connect with. What are we looking to work with and communicate? And one of our greatest ways of talking to spirit is not always about what's being said outwardly, it's also about what's being said inwardly. Now, why this is also all important, especially with the third house and the ram's horns, it goes back to what we're talking about again with the greater society. One of the things that, depending on the schools of thought, many don't particularly teach that there is an ecosystem on the other side. And there are entities, there are spirits, there are energies that love to feed off misery, grief, all of those things. And they have either drafted or set up some sort of relationship with the sources of the grief that we're dealing with in this world now. Now, many would say we need to take them out. Now, again, we're dealing with an ecosystem. Destroy any part of the ecosystem, you destroy the ecosystem. So it's about how are we, again, using our strength, our minds, our bodies, our souls, to operate in such a way that we make sure that while they may be eating, they're eating as little as possible. And that's where spirit is coming in, and that's also where the quartz piece is coming in. It's in that standpoint of, are we remembering and reminding ourselves that we have strength of mind, strength of body, strength of soul, and that we have different times where we can use those elements, even in combination with each other. And this is kind of supported by the thought and the inspiration that are the bones that are around this aspect of it. As you work, and again, as always, the work bone is not purely about what you do to pay the bills. It's what are you here to manifest in the world, in your relationships, in your connection and service to community, in what you communicate to the world. We must always operate from that place of that memory and assessing, well, did this work here? Did that work there? What was more useful? Who responded and listened in these other places? So, I think that's about what they're saying, is that we need to be conscious about our communications and the strength that we show. And know that very much there is a large purpose. We are still functioning here at this time in this place as we see the needs of both restructuring, but also to see the places that people have focused their beliefs and used to coerce and force compliancy. That's no longer going to be tolerated. Much of the world has become much more aware of the games being played, and they're not going to play them the same way anymore. So, that's what we got for the day. I hope that you're all doing well. I know I'm going to be taking a much needed vacation myself. So go forward in the world, look at how you communicate with those around you, and communicate from a place of strength of mind, body, and soul that is appropriate to the situation. Ashe.